And I'd like to start by asking how many of you can remember 1976? Quite a good proportion of you can remember 1976. That's always a good start. What do we remember 1976 for?
A hot summer.
A long, hot summer that seemed to go on forever. And it didn't rain, and there were standpipes in the streets, and there was no water. I remember 1976 something quite different to that. 1976 was the year that I was released from Borstal. For those of you who don't know what Borstal was, it was a place where they sent naughty boys that weren't quite old enough to be sent to prison. In the UK, they don't have them anymore. I don't know what they have now. But I got sent to Borstal in 1975 and I came out again in 1976. Now, to tell you how I got there, I need to wind back just a few years, wind the clock back. So, I was born in 1956, coincidentally 55 years ago today. And I was born into a fundamentalist Christian cult. There is no other way to describe it. And because of that, I was encouraged not to have friends outside of that particular group of people. The house I was brought up in, I had two wonderful parents, but we weren't allowed to have radio, television, we weren't allowed to have many books. We were supposed to go to religious meetings pretty much every day. The older you got, the more you were expected to go, to the point where you got to 11 or 12, you had to go to religious meetings every day, and probably about 5 times on a Sunday. So it took up your whole life. You didn't have a lot of time to do anything else. Consequently, I was in a very cocooned existence. I was wrapped up like that. And then when I left, eventually got a bit too much for me, got into a bit of trouble. From the age of about 12 or 13, I started questioning things, went to school, thought, why can't I be like the other kids at school? Why can't I do what they do? Why do I have to have my whole life controlled all the time? Eventually, I left school, started work at the age of 16, and went into a job in an office in London where, guess what, there weren't any restrictions. Nobody knew what I was doing. So eventually I got invited to go to the pub at lunchtime by the guys in the office, and I thought, shouldn't really be doing that, but I went anyway because I wanted to fit in with them. And guess what, nothing happened. Nothing landed on me and stopped me going, so I went again. And gradually I got to the point over about 6 to 9 months where I thought, yeah, this is what I want to be doing. I want to be mixing with these kind of people. And I have to leave the other life behind. So when I was 17, I went home from my office job one day and I said to my mother, can you lend me a suitcase? And she said, what do you want to borrow a suitcase for? I said, because I'm leaving home. And she looked at me in horror and never said anything, just straight away ran over to the phone, picked up the phone, rang my father who was at work on the other side of London and asked him to come home. And then she said, no, I'm not going to lend you a suitcase because I'm not encouraging you to leave home. So I said, fair enough. I went down to the shop on the corner of our road and I asked the guy in the shop to lend me some carrier bags. I had no intention of giving them back, but I said, can you lend me some carrier bags? Now in those days, carrier bags weren't the flimsy items that you get now. They were quite thick plastic, and you could get quite a lot into 6 carrier bags. So I packed all my belongings into 6 carrier bags. And my father did come home and did try to persuade me not to go, but my mind was made up. So off I went down the road with 3 carrier bags in each hand, walked down the road like this towards the railway station, with both my parents behind me, both in tears. Now I'd never seen my father cry before. I'd seen my mother cry, but I'd never seen my father cry. My mind was made up, I was going, that was it. I went to work in a pub. I was 17, wasn't even old enough to drink in a pub, although I had been doing so for quite some time. Went to work in a pub, nobody asked me how old I was, they just gave me the job. And when when you worked in a pub in London in those days, very often you got accommodation with it. So I got a job and somewhere to live. Now, unbeknownst to me, I'd gone to work in one of the roughest pubs in West London. It's not there anymore. I went a couple of years ago to see if it was still there, and it's been knocked down. Maybe it got burnt down, I don't know. But it was one of the roughest pubs I've certainly ever been in. There were bloodstains on the wooden floor. There were people, they would come in there, they would get drunk, they would batter each other, and then half an hour later they'd be hugging each other and buying each other a drink. That was that kind of place. I learned very, very quickly how to survive in a different world. Not very long after that, I got involved with somebody who dragged me into a criminal lifestyle. And I thought, hey, this is different, and I'm going to go with this. And that was how I ended up in Borstal. Now, a very important thing happened to me. Before I went to Borstal, I had actually left the criminal lifestyle behind and decided that I was going to start again. This was only after less than 2 years away from my family. I thought, I've actually got dragged into something that I don't want to be in here. And that led to me sleeping on Victoria Station in London for one night with nowhere to go. And I woke up the next morning. I had about 2 hours sleep. Believe me, you don't sleep very well on Victoria Station, especially when it's not very warm. This wasn't 1976. And I woke up with 5 pence in my pocket, went and bought a newspaper, read the newspaper, thought, what am I going to do now? I hadn't had anything to eat or drink since the day before, didn't have any money. So what did I do? I walked down Victoria Street towards Parliament Square, and I went knocking on pub doors to see if anybody would give me a job. Fortunately, somebody did. Took me in off the street, gave me a job, gave me somewhere to live. Not only that, but that same person trusted me enough. When the police eventually caught up with me after I'd worked for him for about 3 or 4 months, they arrested me, took me to court, sent me to Borstal. He came and saw me, and he said, your job's waiting for you when you come out. So that's that part of the story. That somebody has to believe in you. You need somebody to believe in you if you're going to get somewhere in life. Because what would I have done? 1976, 19 years old, walking out of Borstal into that beautiful weather. What would I have done if I hadn't had a job or a place to live? I don't know what would have happened to me. I might not have been standing here talking to you today if it wasn't for that one person who helped me and believed in me. So that's just part of the story. I've just finished writing a book. I've got to that part of the story in the book. There's a lot more, but I'd like to leave it there, and thank you for listening.